What you're about to hear is a story that proves the old saying, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," especially when that woman is smarter than everyone in the room. This isn't just about a cheating husband. It's about a multi-million-dollar empire built on secrets, the man who thought he was untouchable, and the woman he fatally underestimated. We'll take you inside the sterile, quiet room where one single devastating text message ignited a financial firestorm. By the time the sun rose over the New York skyline the next day, a powerful man's world had been dismantled, his bank accounts frozen, and his future erased by the very woman he believed he controlled. The air in the Upper East Side clinic was so sterile, it seemed to suck the scent out of the world, leaving only the faint chemical tang of antiseptic. It was an expensive, hushed place, designed to make the messy business of biology feel clean and controlled. Isabella Rossi, however, felt a warmth that defied the clinical chill. It bloomed in her chest, a radiant, private sun, as she watched the monochrome image flicker on the large monitor beside the examination bed. A tiny, thumping heart, a delicate spine curled like a fossil, the unmistakable silhouette of a new life. Her new life, their new life. Everything looks absolutely perfect, Isabella. Dr. Anya Sharma said, her voice a soothing murmur, as she navigated the ultrasound wand over Izzy's still flat stomach. Strong heartbeat growth is right on track for 10 weeks. See that little flutter? That might have been a kick. A laugh light and full of wonder escaped Izzy's lips. She squeezed the hand she was holding, her gaze shifting from the screen to her husband, Harrison Davenport. "Harry, did you see that? He's a soccer player already." Harrison, the scion of the Davenport real estate dynasty, was the picture of devoted fatherhood. He was leaning forward in the plush visitor's chair, his tailored Tom Ford suit jacket unbuttoned, his blue eyes fixed on the screen. He looked every bit the man who had everything, a face that seemed sculpted by a Renaissance artist, a portfolio that ran into 9 figures, and now a beautiful wife carrying his heir. "I see it is," he murmured, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. He squeezed her hand back, but his touch felt distant, automatic. Emotion learned and perfected rather than felt. For a fleeting second, a tiny crack appeared in the perfect facade of the moment. She'd felt that distance more and more lately, a subtle emotional static in the air between them. She'd dismissed it as stress. His latest project, a colossal glass and steel monolith in Hudson Yards, was in a critical phase. He was always stressed. A perfect little Davenport, he added, his smile finally reaching his eyes as he looked at her. And just like that, the crack was sealed. Her own smile returned, pushing away the doubt. He was here. He was holding her hand. He was marveling at their child. Everything was fine. "I'll just print out a few images for you," Dr. Sharma said, her fingers dancing over the keyboard of the machine. "You can get dressed, and we'll see you in 4 weeks." As the doctor stepped out, the room filled with a comfortable silence. Harry finally let go of her hand and stood, stretching his long limbs. He pulled his phone from his inner jacket pocket, his thumb swiping across the screen with practiced ease. It was a gesture as natural to him as breathing. "Just need to fire off a quick text to my father," he said, his back mostly to her. "He's been blowing up my phone all morning, desperate for an update." "Of course," Izzy said, sitting up and swinging her legs off the bed. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. All the anxieties of the first trimester, the morning sickness, the secret fears, they all melted away in the face of that grainy, miraculous image. Their baby was real. Their future was real. She reached for the bottle of water on the side table, and as she turned back, she saw his phone screen angled just so in the reflection of the darkened monitor in front of her. It was an accidental 1 in a million alignment of angles. She wasn't trying to look. She didn't need to. But the words, stark white against the black background, were impossible to miss. They weren't to Arthur Davenport. The recipient was Chloe S. The text, sitting right under his thumb, read, "Scans done. Just a formality. Can't wait to get away from all this and see you tonight. The usual place." The bottle of water slipped from her grasp, hitting the plush carpet with a dull, soundless thud. The air in the room didn't just get cold again, it turned to ice. The private sun in her chest was extinguished, replaced by a black hole that consumed all light, all warmth, all hope. Just a formality. The words echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of her mind. The most magical, profound moment of her life. The first real glimpse of the child they had created, reduced to a chore, an obstacle to be cleared before he could get to his real life. To Chloe S., to the usual place. Her breath hitched. A wave of nausea, far more violent than any morning sickness, washed over her. Her hands grew cold, then her feet a creeping frost, moving up her limbs until it settled deep in her bones. He hadn't noticed. He was still typing, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He hit send. The phone made a soft swoosh, and he slipped it back into his pocket, turning back to her with that same practiced, perfect smile. "All done," he said brightly. "Dad is thrilled. He's already talking about trust funds. Ready to go, my love." Isabella looked at him. She looked at the face she had fallen in love with, the face she had trusted, the face of the man she was building a family with. But she wasn't seeing Harry anymore. She was seeing a stranger, a liar, a hollow man wearing the mask of her husband. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The heartbroken wife, the joyful mother-to-be, receded. And the woman she used to be before Harrison Davenport, before the galas and the Hamptons and the gilded cage of Park Avenue, began to emerge. The woman who had graduated top of her class from Wharton. The woman who had made a name for herself as a forensic accountant, the sharp-eyed analyst who could follow a single stray dollar through the most complex labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The woman who understood that love could be a liability, but money was always power. She manufactured a smile. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, a brittle, fragile thing that felt like it might shatter her face. "Yes," she said, her voice miraculously steady. "I'm ready." He helped her with her coat, his hand on the small of her back. The touch that had once been a comfort now felt like a brand. As they walked out of the clinic, the receptionist handed them a small, glossy envelope. "Your photos, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport. Congratulations." Harrison took them, tucking them into his jacket. "Thank you." In the car, a black Maybach that glided through the city traffic like a shark through water, he talked about his day, a meeting with architects, a call with Tokyo investors, the usual litany of his important, powerful life. Izzy just nodded, her gaze fixed on the blur of the city outside the window. She felt nothing. The shock had cauterized the wound, leaving behind a cold, clear, and terrifyingly calm purpose. He thought she was just a wife, a beautiful accessory, a future mother for his legacy. He had forgotten who she was. He had forgotten what she could do. He had texted his mistress. He had called their baby a formality. And in doing so, he hadn't just broken her heart. He had declared war on the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle his entire world, and she would do it before the sun came up. The Park Avenue penthouse was silent when they returned, a cavernous space of marble glass and curated art that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a museum of a life that was no longer hers. Harrison, blissfully ignorant, kissed her on the cheek. "I have to run, Iz. The board meeting is at 2. I'll be back late, but I'll see you for dinner, all right? I'll have Jean-Pierre make your favorite, the risotto." "Okay, Harry," she said, the words tasting like ash. "You go. I think I'm just going to lie down for a bit. Feeling a little tired after the appointment." "Of course. Get your rest." He gave her one last empty smile and was gone, the solid click of the closing door echoing through the vast apartment. The moment the door shut, Isabella's placid facade crumbled. She didn't cry. The time for tears was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, a glacial rage, pure and diamond-hard, settled in her heart. She walked, not to their master bedroom, with its silk sheets and panoramic views, but to the room at the end of the hall, her home office. This was her sanctuary, the one space in the apartment that was truly hers. While Harrison's study was a monument to ego, all dark mahogany, leather-bound books he never read, and trophies from his polo days, her office was a temple of function. A triple monitor setup dominated a sleek, minimalist desk. The bookshelves were filled not with classics, but with binders of financial regulations, tax law, and case studies of corporate fraud. This was where Isabella Rossi, the forensic accountant, still lived. She sat down in her ergonomic chair, the leather cool against her skin. For a moment, she closed her eyes, replaying the text message in her mind. Chloe S. The name meant nothing to her, but the initial was enough. The betrayal was absolute, but it was the carelessness of it that fueled her anger. The sheer breathtaking arrogance to do it right there, right at the moment they were supposed to be sharing something sacred. He didn't just disrespect her, he erased her. Fine. She would erase him. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of motion that was both elegant and lethal. Her first stop was not a bank account, but social media. It was amateurish, but often effective. She cross-referenced Harrison's contacts, his followed accounts, searching for Chloe S. It took 7 minutes. Chloe Sterling, a 26-year-old art gallery assistant from a Soho boutique gallery that Davenport Holdings had sponsored last year. Her profile was a curated fantasy of a life Isabella knew well, galas she herself had attended, yachting trips in the Mediterranean, on boats Harrison had chartered, weekends in Aspen. A ghost life lived in her shadow, funded by her husband. One photo from 3 months ago showed her laughing on the deck of a familiar yacht, a man's arm around her, his face just out of frame. But Izzy recognized the watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe Calatrava, the one she had given Harrison for their first anniversary. The confirmation was a cold, hard stone in her gut. Now for the real work. Before she married Harrison, she had insisted on 2 things: a prenuptial agreement and full transparent access to their joint finances. Harrison, seeing it as a quaint request from a woman who used to work with numbers, had readily agreed, amused by her diligence. The prenup was his idea, designed by his father's team of legal sharks to protect the Davenport family assets. But Izzy had read every line. She had negotiated her own clauses his lawyers had deemed trivial. One was a brutally specific infidelity clause. It stipulated that in the event of proven marital infidelity, the standard division of assets would be void. Instead, any assets acquired during the marriage would be subject to a 70-30 split in her favor. His lawyers had scoffed, but Harrison, confident in his own discretion, had waved it through. The second more important tool was her administrative access to the Davenport family office's financial portal, a digital dashboard that connected everything: their joint accounts, Harrison's personal trusts, the intricate web of LLCs that formed the backbone of Davenport Holdings. He thought of her as a passenger in his financial world. He never imagined she still knew how to fly the plane. She logged in. The screen lit up with columns of numbers, tickers, and account summaries, a language she understood better than poetry. Her first search was for payments to Chloe Sterling. There was nothing direct. Harrison wasn't that stupid, but he was arrogant, and arrogance breeds sloppiness. She started cross-referencing his corporate credit card statements with the dates of Chloe's social media posts. A trip to St. Bart's in May. The same week, Harrison's card had a $50,000 charge at the Eden Rock Hotel, a shopping spree on Fifth Avenue. The following day, his card had charges at Cartier Celine and Bergdorf's totaling over $80,000. It was a clear pattern of financial leakage, marital assets being used to fund an affair. This was good. This was enough to trigger the infidelity clause. But it wasn't enough. It was messy, and it would lead to a protracted, ugly legal battle. She didn't want a battle. She wanted a decapitation. She dug deeper her mind, a steel trap, sifting through layers of transactions. Harrison had a habit of setting up single-purpose LLCs for his side projects, a common practice in real estate to insulate liability. She pulled up the list. Most were obvious: D.H. Hudson Yards LLC, Davenport Gramercy Partners LLC. But one stood out, created 8 months ago: Ariadne's Thread LLC. The name was a pretentious nod to Greek mythology, the thread that led Theseus out of the Minotaur's labyrinth. It had no listed real estate assets. Its funding came from irregular six-figure transfers from one of Harrison's primary trust funds, a fund technically classified as a marital asset since its value had tripled due to market investments Isabella had personally advised on. Ariadne's Thread LLC had only one purpose. Its outflow was a series of regular payments, a $30,000 monthly wire transfer to an account under Chloe Sterling's name, and a lease payment on a luxury apartment in a non-Davenport building in Tribeca. This was the smoking gun. Not just funding a lifestyle, but a systematic structured financial vehicle for an affair created with commingled marital assets. This wasn't just infidelity. In the cold, hard language of the law, it was financial malfeasance. It was a breach of fiduciary duty to their marital partnership. She downloaded everything: encrypted transaction logs, bank statements, the LLC's formation documents, the screenshots of Chloe's incriminating social media. She created a perfect, unimpeachable digital paper trail, a labyrinth of evidence from which there was no escape. The clock on her monitor read 10:47 p.m. The city glittered outside her window, a sea of indifferent lights. She took a deep breath and began the final phase. First, she drafted an email to her lawyer, Marco Rossi, her older brother, a bulldog of a litigator who had always been skeptical of Harrison. The subject line was simple: "It's time. Execute." Attached was the secure, password-protected file containing all the evidence. Marco would know exactly what to do. He'd have the injunctions filed by the time the courts opened. Second, she accessed the control panel for their joint assets. The prenup, which she now had in her hands, gave her the authority. The financial malfeasance clause, another one of her trivial additions, gave her the power to take protective action if she had reason to believe marital assets were being improperly diverted or devalued. diverting hundreds of thousands of dollars to a mistress certainly qualified. She started with the accounts linked to Ariadne's Thread LLC. With a few clicks, she initiated a transfer of all remaining funds back to their primary joint account, effectively gutting the shell company. She then placed a hold on the account itself. Next, Harrison's personal credit cards, the ones she had just proven, were being used for the affair. As a joint account holder with administrative rights, she had the power. She logged into each portal, American Express, Centurion, JP Morgan Reserve, and reported the cards as subject to fraudulent activity, requesting an immediate freeze. It was technically true. He was defrauding their marriage. Finally, the masterstroke. The main operating accounts Harrison used for his daily liquidity, the ones he drew from for cash, for investments, for everything. These were joint accounts. She couldn't empty them without raising immediate red flags, but she didn't have to. She simply logged into the banking portal and placed a security freeze on all outbound transactions exceeding $1,000, citing the suspicious activity she had uncovered in the Ariadne's Thread LLC. To any bank official, it would look like a prudent partner protecting their joint assets from potential fraud. The freeze would require dual signature authorization, hers and his, to be lifted. An authorization he would never get. The final click echoed in the silent room. It was 4:15 a.m. The sky outside was beginning to soften from black to a deep indigo. She had systematically and entirely legally severed Harrison Davenport's access to his own liquid wealth. His cards wouldn't work. His wires wouldn't go through. His ATM withdrawals would be denied. He was still a billionaire on paper, but as of this morning, he wouldn't have enough cash to buy a cup of coffee. She leaned back in her chair, a profound, chilling calm washing over her. She hadn't just frozen his accounts. She had taken a scalpel to his life and with surgical precision cut him off from the two things he valued most, his money and his freedom. She stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. She caught her reflection in the dark glass of the wine fridge. She looked pale, exhausted, but her eyes held a fire he had never seen. The sun was rising, and with it, the dawn of Harrison Davenport's ruin. She had his sonogram pictures in her hand, the little envelope from the clinic. She looked at the grainy image of her child. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, a single hot tear finally tracing a path down her cold cheek. "And I will build a world for you, a better one." Harrison Davenport woke up feeling like the king of the world. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Chloe's Tribeca apartment, a different, more artistic light than the imposing glare of his Park Avenue penthouse. Chloe was still asleep, her blonde hair fanned out across the pillow, a picture of youthful, uncomplicated beauty. Last night had been perfect, a celebration. He'd told her about the baby scan, framing it as a tedious but necessary step toward their future. Once the heir is secured, he'd whispered to her over champagne, "My father will ease up. My position will be undeniable. And then we can start making real plans." He believed it. He saw his life as a series of chess moves, and Isabella's pregnancy was his checkmate. It solidified his legacy, pleased his tyrannical father, and ironically gave him more freedom to be with Chloe. He felt a pang of something not quite guilt, more like inconvenience, when he thought of Izzy. She was a good wife, smart, beautiful, efficient, but she was predictable. She was part of the plan, a component of the machine. Chloe was the escape, the thrill. He slipped out of bed, showered and dressed in the spare suit he kept at Chloe's. He checked his phone. A single email from his brother-in-law Marco Rossi had arrived at 6:02 a.m. The subject was urgent legal notice. He snorted. Marco was always so dramatic, probably some tedious paperwork for a trust. He'd look at it later. He kissed a sleepy Chloe goodbye, promising to see her that evening, and stepped out into the crisp morning air, feeling invincible. He walked to his favorite local coffee shop, a place where the barista knew his order, a large 4-shot Americano. "Morning, Mr. Davenport," the barista said, already reaching for the grinder. "Morning, Leo." The usual. He pulled out his Centurion card, the black card, and tapped it on the reader. The machine beeped angrily. Declined. Harrison frowned. Leo looked embarrassed for him. Maybe try it again. He tapped it again. Declined. A flicker of annoyance went through him. He pulled out his J.P. Morgan Reserve card. The same result. A small line was forming behind him. He could feel their eyes on him. Harrison Davenport declined for a $7 coffee. The absurdity was infuriating. "My apologies," he said, his voice tight. "Must be an issue with the readers this morning." He fumbled in his wallet for cash, but he only had a 20. He never carried much cash. He threw it on the counter, told Leo to keep the change, and stalked out, his face burning. In the back of his chauffeured car, the annoyance curdled into genuine concern. He called the Amex Centurion concierge. The voice on the other end was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davenport, but the account was frozen early this morning, due to a report of suspicious activity filed by the primary co-signer, Isabella Rossi Davenport. We cannot lift the freeze without her verbal and written consent." The name hit him like a physical blow. Isabella. Why would she do that? It had to be a mistake. Some overzealous reaction to a scam email. He immediately called her. It went straight to voicemail. "Izzy, it's me. There's been some ridiculous mistake with the credit cards. Call me back immediately. I'm heading into a meeting." Next, he called his private banker at J.P. Morgan. It was the same story, a security freeze placed on all his accounts by his wife, citing potential financial malfeasance and unauthorized transfers. "Unauthorized transfers," he repeated, his voice rising. "What unauthorized transfers, sir?" The flag was raised in relation to an entity called Ariadne's Thread, LLC. Your wife provided documentation. The world tilted on its axis. Ariadne's Thread, his private airtight vehicle for funding Chloe. Impossible. No one knew about it. He had buried it 3 layers deep in a trust. How could she possibly? His blood ran cold. The forensic accountant, the quiet, diligent woman in her minimalist office, the prenup clauses he dismissed as trivial, the full administrative access he had so magnanimously granted her. It wasn't a mistake. It was a sniper shot. He told his driver to forget Hudson Yards and race back to the penthouse. His hands were shaking as he finally opened the email from Marco. It wasn't paperwork. It was a petition for divorce. Attached were dozens of files, bank statements, credit card receipts, screenshots of Chloe's Instagram, and the complete financial autopsy of Ariadne's Thread LLC. It was a flawless case file, an open and shut case of infidelity and misappropriation of marital funds. When he burst through the door of the penthouse, Isabella was in the living room, sitting calmly on one of the white sofas, sipping tea. She was dressed in a simple but elegant cream-colored cashmere dress. She looked serene, rested. The morning sun caught the highlights in her dark hair. She didn't look like a woman scorned. She looked like a CEO who had just closed the deal of a lifetime. "Isabella, what the hell is this?" he roared, waving his phone at her. The email from Marco glowing on the screen. You froze my accounts. A divorce. Are you insane? She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea before placing the cup soundlessly on its saucer. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw no love in her eyes. No warmth, no fear, only a cold, assessing intelligence that chilled him to the bone. "No, Harrison," she said, her voice even and calm. "I am for the first time in a long time perfectly sane. I would suggest you lower your voice. It's not good for the baby." The mention of the baby used so calmly as a weapon against him stunned him into silence. "My cards are declined. My accounts are frozen. My lawyer is being served with injunctions. This is crazy," he stammered, his anger deflating into disbelief. "It's not crazy. It's contractual," she corrected him gently. "You violated the terms of our marriage, specifically Clause 17B of our prenuptial agreement regarding infidelity. You also violated Clause 24 regarding fiduciary duty by creating a shell corporation with commingled marital assets to fund your affair with Ms. Chloe Sterling." She said the name without a trace of emotion, as if reading from a report. He felt the floor drop out from under him. "How did you left your phone screen reflected in the monitor at the clinic yesterday," she said simply. "You called our child a formality. The rest was just pulling on the thread, so to speak. Your Ariadne's thread. It was rather poetic, don't you think?" He stared at her speechless. The sheer scale of his miscalculation was crashing down on him. He had thought of her as part of the scenery, a beautiful static object in his life. He had never, not for 1 second, considered her a threat. He had forgotten that the quietest people in the room are often the most dangerous. "Izzy, please," he began, his tone shifting from outrage to desperation. This was a negotiation. He knew negotiations. "Whatever you think you saw, whatever you found, we can talk about this. We don't have to do this. We have a child on the way, a family. We had a family." She corrected him again, the finality in her voice like a slammed door. "You reduced it to a formality. I am simply acting accordingly. The divorce petition has been filed. The injunctions will prevent you from moving or hiding any assets. All joint accounts are frozen pending judicial review. Your access to the Davenport family portal has been revoked." She stood up, walking over to the grand piano by the window. She ran a hand over the polished surface, her back to him. "You are a billionaire on paper, Harry, but as of this morning, you are illiquid. You have been excised from the accounts from this home and from my life." She turned back to him. "My brother, who I believe you've met, will be handling all communication from now on. I'd advise you to find your own legal counsel. I imagine you'll need a very good one." His world, which hours ago had been a glittering empire at his command, had shrunk to the 4 walls of this room. He was a king in his own castle, suddenly a prisoner. The woman before him held all the keys, and he could see in her cold, clear eyes that she would never give them back. "You can't do this," he whispered, the last dregs of his arrogance draining away, leaving only raw panic. Isabella picked up the small, glossy envelope from the piano. She slid one of the sonogram pictures out and held it up. "I'm doing this for him," she said, "so he never has to learn what a formality his own father thought he was." She slid the picture back in the envelope. "Security will be here in 5 minutes to escort you out. Please gather your immediate personal belongings. The rest will be handled by the lawyers." Harrison Davenport stood in the center of his multi-million-dollar living room, surrounded by Picassos and Warhols, and understood, for the first time in his privilege-gilded life, the true meaning of the word bankrupt. News in the rarefied air of New York high finance travels faster than light. It doesn't move through press releases or news tickers, but through a neural network of whispers, encrypted messages, and discreet phone calls between people who manage the world's money. By midday, the word was out: Harrison Davenport was financially paralyzed. The first tremor hit the trading floor. Davenport Holdings DVPT was a stable, if unexciting stock, a blue-chip behemoth built on concrete and steel. But the rumors of an asset freeze on its CEO tied to a messy divorce were like blood in the water. The stock, which had opened at a solid $238 a share, began to slide. First by a few points, then by 10, then by 20. Algorithmic trading bots, programmed to react to negative sentiment and executive instability, kicked in, accelerating the sell-off. In the 50th floor boardroom of the Davenport Tower, the emergency board meeting was chaos. Arthur Davenport Harrison's father, and the iron-fisted patriarch who had built the empire, presided over the table with a face like thunder. He wasn't yelling. Arthur never yelled. His fury was a cold, dense mass that lowered the temperature of the room. "Someone explained to me," Arthur said, his voice dangerously soft, "how my son, the CEO of this company, is currently a top trending topic on financial Twitter for having his black card declined while buying a latte." The board members, a collection of gray-haired men who had known Harrison since he was in diapers, shifted uncomfortably. The company's general counsel, a man named Sterling Blackwood, cleared his throat. "Arthur, we've received the filing from Isabella's counsel. It's thorough. She's invoking malfeasance clauses and has provided irrefutable proof of misappropriation of marital assets to fund a third party. She's built a fortress. Every action she's taken is on its face legal and contractually sound." "Legal," Arthur snapped his fist, hitting the polished mahogany table with a sharp crack. "The woman has staged a corporate coup using a prenuptial agreement. She has locked our CEO out of his own life and sent our stock into a nosedive. Forget legal. How do we fight back?" "That's the problem," Blackwood said, shaking his head. "To fight back, we'd have to challenge her evidence in open court. We'd have to put Harrison on the stand to explain Ariadne's Thread LLC. The discovery process would be a nightmare. It would legitimize the scandal. The short sellers would tear us to pieces." Arthur's jaw tightened. He understood. Isabella hadn't just attacked Harrison. She had attacked the company's most vulnerable point, its reputation. She had created a crisis where the only way to fight back was to douse the flames with gasoline. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. He found himself feeling a flicker of horrified admiration. He had always thought Isabella was too gentle for his son. He had mistaken grace for weakness. Meanwhile, the second ripple was hitting Tribeca. Chloe Sterling woke up around noon to a barrage of texts from friends. "OMG, is this about you?" with a link to a gossip blog. She tried to call Harrison. His phone was off. She tried his office. His secretary told her, in a voice dripping with ice, that Mr. Davenport was unavailable indefinitely. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She got dressed and went to her favorite boutique to indulge in some retail therapy, a trick that always worked. At the counter, her credit card, a supplementary one from an account Harrison had set up for her, was declined. She tried another. Same result. Panic set in. She rushed back to her apartment, the beautiful, sun-drenched space that was her sanctuary, and logged into her bank account. The balance, which should have been comfortably in the 5 figures, was $2,314.12. The monthly $30 and $1,000 wire transfer from Ariadne's Thread LLC was gone. In its place was a notification, payer account closed. Chloe Sterling finally understood. She wasn't a partner in Harrison's grand plan. She was an expense. And Isabella had just cut her off. Desperate, she tried calling Harrison one last time, straight to voicemail. He had vanished. He had abandoned her at the first sign of trouble, leaving her stranded in a life she could no longer afford. The third and most significant ripple landed back at the Park Avenue penthouse. Isabella, having been briefed by Marco all morning, was expecting it. The call came not from Harrison, but from an unknown number. Isabella Rossi speaking. She answered, her voice calm. Ms. Rossi, a crisp, authoritative voice, has said, "This is Sterling Blackwood, General Counsel for Davenport Holdings. I'm calling on behalf of Arthur Davenport. He would like to request a meeting with you as soon as possible." The shift was seismic. They weren't sending Harrison's personal divorce lawyer. They were sending the company's top legal mind, representing the patriarch himself. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It had escalated. It was a corporate negotiation. They weren't trying to save the marriage anymore. They were trying to save the empire. "Mr. Blackwood," Isabella replied, a hint of steel in her tone. "I'm not sure a meeting is necessary. My position has been made quite clear in the documents filed by my counsel." With respect, Isabella Blackwood's tone softened slightly, a calculated move. "Arthur believes this situation has escalated beyond its initial scope. There are broader implications to consider. The stability of the company, the well-being of its thousands of employees, your own future financial security, and that of your child are tied to the health of Davenport Holdings." It was a veiled threat, wrapped in the language of mutual interest. "Don't sink the ship you're still standing on." Isabella saw the move for what it was. A gambit. They were testing her resolve. "My future financial security and my child's is what I am focused on, Mr. Blackwood," she said coolly. "And from where I'm sitting, the primary threat to that security is your CEO's reckless and fraudulent behavior. Perhaps you should be meeting with him, not me." There was a pause on the other end. She could almost hear the gears turning in Blackwood's legal mind, recalibrating his approach. "Arthur is prepared to be generous," he said finally. "He wishes to discuss a global settlement that would be swift, private, and exceedingly favorable to you. He just wants to put this unfortunate chapter behind everyone." Isabella allowed herself a small, mirthless smile. They weren't calling to fight. They were calling to surrender. They just didn't want to admit it yet. They wanted to frame it as their idea, their generous offer. "Fine," she said, making her voice sound reluctant. "I will agree to a meeting. But not in your office and not with a fleet of lawyers. Just you, me, and Arthur. And my brother, Marco, here, in my home. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. She was dictating the terms, the location, the attendees, the time. She was making it clear who held the power now. "That's acceptable," Blackwood conceded. "We'll be there." As she hung up, Isabella walked to the window, looking down at the river of yellow cabs on Park Avenue. Harrison was a problem they were now trying to manage, an unstable asset. She had not only taken on her husband, she had put the entire Davenport dynasty on the back foot. Arthur wasn't coming to save his son. He was coming to cut his losses. And Isabella knew exactly what price she would demand for that privilege. The next morning, the air in the penthouse crackled with a tension that the finest air purification system couldn't scrub away. Isabella had chosen her attire with the care of a general preparing for a treaty signing. She wore a tailored, dark navy dress that was professional, severe, and unapologetically expensive. It was a suit of armor, disguised as couture. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of simple diamond studs. She was the picture of calm, formidable control. Her brother, Marco Rossi, stood by the window, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He was built like the linebacker he'd been in college, and in his dark, perfectly cut suit, he radiated an aura of raw urban intimidation that contrasted sharply with the polished old money power of their expected guests. "You ready for this, Izzy?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "They're the ones who should be asking that question," she replied, placing a file on the glass coffee table. It was thin, containing only a single sheet of paper. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the chime of the private elevator announced their arrival. The doors opened to reveal Arthur Davenport and his lawyer, Sterling Blackwood. Arthur was an older, harder version of his son, with eyes like chips of granite and a presence that seemed to consume all the oxygen in a room. He was a titan of industry, a man accustomed to utter deference. Today, however, there was a faint, almost imperceptible crack in his imperial facade. "Isabella," Arthur said, his voice a gravelly baritone. He nodded curtly at Marco. "Thank you for seeing us." "Arthur," Mr. Blackwood, Isabella said, her tone level. "Please have a seat." She didn't offer coffee or water. This was not a social call. They sat opposite her on the stark white sofas, a chasm of expensive carpet between them. Arthur, never one for pleasantries, got straight to the point. "Let's not waste time with theatrics. You have made your point. You have leveraged your position to create a significant disruption. I am here to put an end to it." "I'm glad we understand each other," Isabella replied smoothly. "I assume you're here to discuss the terms of my divorce settlement with your son." "I am here to discuss the terms of a global resolution that ensures the continued stability of my company." Arthur corrected her, his eyes locking onto hers. "My son's marital issues are now a corporate liability. I am cleaning up his mess. So name your price. What will it take to make this go away quietly and quickly?" This was the moment. The culmination of her cold fury, her sleepless night of planning. She didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. "This isn't a negotiation, Arthur. I'm not here to haggle. I am here to inform you of the terms under which I will agree to not pursue a full forensic audit of Davenport Holdings for financial malfeasance and tax irregularities. The divorce settlement is simply a consequence of that." Blackwood stiffened. Arthur's eyes narrowed. She had escalated the threat. She wasn't just talking about the affair anymore. She was implying she had found or could find bigger skeletons in the corporate closet. "My terms are not complicated," Isabella continued, her voice cutting through the tension. "They are absolute and non-negotiable." She pushed the single sheet of paper across the table. Arthur picked it up. Marco stood silently behind her, a sentinel, daring them to object. First, she began enumerating the points as he read. "The infidelity clause of our prenuptial agreement is enacted. I will receive 70% of all assets whose value increased during our marriage. My financial team values that at approximately $180 million. This includes Harrison's shares in the Hudson Yards project, which I personally advised him to invest in." Arthur's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "Second, this penthouse. The title will be transferred to my name, free and clear, within 48 hours. My child will be raised here, and it will not be under the Davenport name. Third," she went on, her voice hardening, "you will establish an irrevocable trust for my child. Not Harrison, you. The Davenport Family Foundation will seed it with $50 million. I will be the sole trustee. This is not Harrison's money. This is an insurance policy from the family for the damage your son has caused to his own child's lineage. Blackwood started to speak, but Arthur shot him a look that silenced him instantly. Fourth, Harrison will issue a public statement drafted by my team taking full and sole responsibility for the dissolution of our marriage. There will be no mention of a third party, no mudslinging. He will simply state that he failed in his duties as a husband and wishes me and our child well. This protects me from the tabloid narrative and preserves a shred of dignity for the family name. She paused, letting the weight of her demands settle in the room. This was not just a settlement, it was a surrender. She was stripping Harrison of his wealth, his home, and his narrative. And finally, she said, her eyes boring into Arthur's, an ironclad, mutually binding non-disclosure agreement. If any party, you, Harrison, Chloe Sterling, or any of your associates breathes a word of the specifics of this arrangement, a penalty clause is triggered. A penalty of an additional $100 million payable to me. You will ensure Ms. Sterling's compliance. I don't care how. Silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the city far below. Arthur Davenport stared at the single sheet of paper, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He had spent his life crushing opponents, leveraging fear, and buying victory. And now, this woman, his daughter-in-law, was holding a financial gun to his head, and he knew with chilling certainty that the gun was loaded. To fight her in court would expose the company to regulatory bodies and public scandal far more damaging than the cost of her demands. She had checkmated him. He slowly folded the paper and placed it back on the table. He looked past Isabella to Marco, then back to her. You have your mother's eyes, he said, an odd, almost wistful note in his voice. But you have my stomach for a fight. He stood up. Sterling Blackwood followed, looking pale. Blackwood will coordinate with your brother to finalize the paperwork, Arthur announced. You will have everything you've asked for by the end of the week. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply turned and walked toward the elevator, a defeated titan, retreating from a battle he never knew he was in. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing Arthur's defeat, Isabella finally allowed herself to exhale. The tension drained out of her, leaving a profound and hollow exhaustion. She sank back into the sofa. Marco came over and put a heavy, comforting hand on her shoulder. You did it, Iz. You actually did it. She looked up at her brother, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I didn't want any of this, Marco. I know, he said softly, but he gave you no choice. You just finished the war he started. Isabella looked around the vast, silent room. It was hers now, all of it. She had won. But it felt less like a victory and more like the end of a terrible, necessary storm. 6 months later, the Park Avenue penthouse was transformed. The cold, museum-like austerity had been replaced with warmth and life. The severe white sofas were gone, supplanted by comfortable plush furniture in soft shades of gray and blue. The abstract, impersonal art had been swapped for vibrant paintings, and in the corner of the great room, a collection of framed architectural drawings of Isabella's own new projects. The space no longer felt like the Davenports' monument to wealth. It felt like Isabella Rossi's home. The most significant change was the room that used to be Harrison's mahogany and leather study. It was now a nursery painted a gentle sage green. A beautiful modern crib stood against one wall, and a comfortable rocking chair sat by the window overlooking Central Park. Isabella, her belly, now a proud round curve under a simple linen dress, stood in the center of the room, running a hand over the smooth wood of the crib. She was no longer just Isabella Rossi, the scorned wife, or the forensic accountant. She was now the founder and managing partner of Rossi Capital, a boutique investment firm she had launched 3 months ago. With a starting capital of over $100 million and a reputation for being terrifyingly meticulous, her firm was already making waves, focusing on sustainable development and tech startups, the opposite of the old-world cutthroat real estate of the Davenports. The divorce had been finalized with quiet surgical speed. Harrison, a ghost in his own life, had signed everything put in front of him. His public statement had been released, and he had subsequently vanished from the New York social scene, reportedly licking his wounds in a wellness retreat in Arizona. He was still a wealthy man. His father had ensured he wouldn't be destitute, but his power, his influence, and his reputation were gone. He was a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Chloe Sterling had also disappeared. Isabella's lawyers had delivered a settlement and a draconian NDA to her bought with Davenport money. She had taken it and vanished, her social media accounts wiped clean, another casualty of a war she never understood she was fighting in. Arthur Davenport had kept his word. The money, the title, the trust, it had all been transferred flawlessly. Isabella hadn't spoken to him since their meeting, but she knew he was watching her. Rossi Capital's early successes were noted in the financial press. She suspected that on some level, the old titan respected her more than he had ever respected his own son. She had proven herself a player, not a pawn. A soft chime from her phone drew her attention. It was a message from Marco, heard from his lawyers. He wants to petition for visitation rights after the birth. Isabella's hand stilled on the crib. A flicker of the old anger, the old pain, went through her. Harrison, who had called this child a formality, now wanted to play the part of a father. She typed her reply, her fingers steady. Let him, we will follow the legal process. But he will find that rights come with responsibilities he has never understood. She put the phone down, refusing to let him cast a shadow on her peace. She walked over to the rocking chair and sat looking out at the sprawling green of the park. She felt a strong kick from within a little life, reminding her of its presence. She smiled, placing a hand on her belly. The last 6 months had been a trial by fire. She had walked through the wreckage of her old life, her heart shattered, and from the ashes she had built something new, something stronger, something that was entirely hers. She had secured her future, and more importantly, the future of the child who was about to enter the world. She thought back to that moment in the clinic, the cold dread that had enveloped her as she read that text message. It felt like a lifetime ago. The woman she had been, then hopeful, trusting, a little naive, was gone forever. The woman who remained was a survivor, a founder, a mother. She had learned the hardest lesson of her life, that sometimes the only way to build a new foundation is to burn the old one to the ground. Another kick, this one more insistent. I know, she murmured, her voice soft and full of a love that was pure and unconditional. The world is waiting for you, and don't you worry, I've made sure it's ready. Looking out over the city skyline, a view she had earned not through marriage, but through courage and intellect, Isabella Rossi felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. It was time to build. And that's how a single text message unraveled a multi-million-dollar dynasty. It's a powerful reminder that the greatest asset is never money or power, but the intelligence and resolve that people, especially those we underestimate, hold within them. Isabella Rossi didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life. secured her child's future, and built a new empire on her own terms, proving that the ultimate power move is betting on yourself. What did you think of Isabella's story? Was her response justified, or did she go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of betrayal, intellect, and ultimate triumph as compelling as we did, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a good drama. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of real-life drama and unbelievable twists.